We're so thrilled to be partnering once again with Theater Masters. This is now our 10th year partnering together. So, yeah. Yeah. All you. I have the privilege of introducing Theater Masters founder and executive director, Julia Hansen. While president of the Drama League of New York, Julia founded the Directors Project, a national training program for young directors. She served on boards of the Acting Company, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, the Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers Foundation, the Lincoln Center Theater, and the Advisory Board of DramaWorks, in West Palm Beach, Florida. And we are so happy that she is continuing our friendship and bringing these wonderful, talented people to Aspen by way of Theater Masters. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia. And again, thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. It is a privilege and an honor to be a part of the Institute in any way we can. And this is one way that we have a chance to share with you new ideas. And the other way we get to share new ideas with the Institute is by having visionary playwrights, because the Institute gives to us 2 places for young playwrights to come and then take away a big idea and write a play. And one is currently off-Broadway and was nominated for a Pulitzer. So we're very proud of that, just to tell you. So not a bad beginning for Theater Masters. Now, there are 3 absolutely distinguished panelists with us today, and all of whom are very close to Theater Masters in one way or the other. To my right is Andrew Leynse, who is the Artistic Director of Primary Stages and has been our distinguished advisor for many years, and we're glad that he always gets to Aspen. He doesn't always get here on one day, but he leaves with a snowstorm always, so be ready. We hear that one is predicted, and you will get to see maybe Andrew a little more than he planned. Next to him is Alex Maggio, who is a current writer for CBS's Madam Secretary and was a distinguished playwright for us as a winner of the Take 10 program in 2010. This being our 10th anniversary, it is the first year that we've had our distinguished reader and alumni, and we're really pleased to have you, Alex, back in Aspen. And on the far end is the beautiful Naomi Jones, who is now the co-artistic director of Theater Masters and began her life in theater by writing for our Take 10 and has just come back from Sundance, where she has written on a film for Amazon. So we have the theater, we have TV and film represented on this panel, and I think we should just stick to the subject, which says the changing landscape of theater, and I would say of entertainment today, and how that is affecting us. And since Naomi is both a playwright and is writing for TV and film, right? I'm going to let you start by commenting what that landscape is, and then let our panelists fill in there afterwards.
Sure. Because I work mainly in indie film, and now I'm writing for a new Amazon TV series, I feel like I'm having this conversation constantly of like, where is the audience, and what does that mean for us? Because our other panelists cover TV and theater, I'll talk more about film. We're in a really interesting period for film right now. I feel like we're kind of where the music industry was 10 years ago, because piracy has exploded. To give you a sense, they did a recent survey of 15 small indie films recently, and they calculated that piracy lost those 15 films approximately $1.3 million in revenue. It's massive, and it has cut a huge hole in the way that films make money. Simultaneous to that, people are less likely to go see films in the theaters. They're more likely to rent it from iTunes or on their television, to wait till they can watch it in the comfort of their own homes. And so that has also cut a big swath through the revenue streams of film. So this really interesting thing is happening where Hollywood is panicking because they only know how to make massive films. They can't cut down their budgets to things that they can actually make back money on now. So what's happened is that Hollywood has, their solution to this, instead of cutting their budgets, has basically been to decide that then they have to sell every film in every market anywhere in the world. So they basically only make films that translate to any culture in the world, which if you have wondered why some movies have been made recently, you're like, how did this film get made? It's because they can only make films that will read in China as well as they read in South Africa as well as they read here. So if you think about what that means for writers and for a film, basically that means that you can't have a film that relies on any cultural context whatsoever. So comedies become really hard because comedy tends to be really culturally specific. Basically, the only thing that works is explosions and weirdly superheroes, explosions, and weirdly Adam Sandler movies. Internationally, it's very strange. So Hollywood has gone further and further into that direction because they cannot make back their budgets domestically anymore, which I feel has opened this really interesting Wild West for indie filmmaking in a way that's not existed since the 80s, because suddenly there's this huge dearth of adult content, and I don't mean X-rated content, I mean like content for grown-ups being made in this country. And I think audiences are really tired of dumb films and want to be spoken to like adults. So there's this really interesting opening for indie films that are agile enough to be made on small enough budgets that you actually can make money back domestically. So in a weird way, I think this sort of panic that's sweeping the movie industry has actually been really good for people like me who are coming in with really lower budget indie films.
Moving to television, are you feeling any of the pressure from, what I would say, would your network be feeling any of the pressure? And how about you on writing on a soap?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll speak to my experience riding one of the last remaining dinosaurs into the sunset, CBS. It's an interesting it's an interesting moment, I think, for network television. It's still highly profitable. But there's a creeping sense of doom. Particularly, the audiences are increasingly skewing older for a lot of the networks, especially for CBS. I think the median age for Madam Secretary viewers is 61. So I love to tell people my own age that your parents love the show I write for. Sometimes the grandparents do too, because you have to have a certain amount above the average. But I think in some ways it's in creative ways it's shaped it positively. I think the pressure from having so many really probative serialized television shows, both on basic cable and premium, and on Amazon and Netflix, has made the executives at networks more interested in in-depth storytelling. So I'm very confident that a show like the one I'm writing on 10 years ago would have been entirely episodic. It would have been new problem in a new country every week for the Secretary of State. And now we sort of live in a situation where the people we work for are willing to accept much more serialized storytelling. And that's great for us because as a writer, that's the real tissue of what you love to get into, and it really helps you develop character in a way you probably weren't able to previously. But it's a tough landscape. I mean, people keep talking about, have we reached peak TV, or have we gotten to peak TV? A few executives have started sounding the alarm for that, sort of worrying that as shows get more and more specific and fragmented and viewership gets smaller and smaller for all these individual things, that it's going to become increasingly less profitable. I think that is something looming. But for the moment, it's great for the consumer. The amount of content out there is pretty profound, and it's interesting. I'd be curious about the perspective of other panelists, but I feel like that is having an impact on theater, just because one of the virtues of theater previously, reliably, was that there were just certain subjects that would never be addressed on television that you could explore in theater. But now that there's such a proliferation of different shows, increasingly getting more and more specific. For example, like Transparent on Amazon, I think that's a world that you would have only seen in theater up until very recently. All of a sudden now it's on television. So I think increasingly what's going to distinguish theater from television is really not so much subject matter. Obviously theater's always been a lot more than that, but it used to be a sort of reliable point of differentiation between the two that's, I think, changing now.
And Andrew, back to the old theater with those
Yes.
four walls. Are they still always going to be four walls there? Are we going to be site specific? What's happening?
Well, it's funny because, I guess we've always been struggling. So it's nice to hear everybody else's. But the theater, from an economic point of view, there's two things. In the theater, if your show, your premiere, your playwright, you write a play, it gets done in New York. If it does not get a good review in New York, it's not going to go anywhere. If you do a new film, what Naomi talks about is you can sell this film to other outlets, and there's a life beyond that, and you can actually make money back. Now, what's changing, and I'm very excited about this, and I've never been, as an artistic director of a theater company, never been like premiere, we call it premiere-itis, where you have to have the New York premiere of a show, and people come to the theater and they don't even know what that means. It's only us who thinks that matters, because most people, they don't know if it's a premiere or not, because they're just watching a show and they want to, have an exciting experience, whatever that may be. And so I think that landscape is changing now because of the proliferation of theater companies across the United States that have realized and woken up to the fact that their theater companies just don't have to do the Christmas Carol to survive, that they can actually do a new play festival and they'll get an audience for it. They've opened up all across the country. Denver Center has the summit on the 19th coming up, which I'll be at. That's a new play festival now. It's like a ninth year. All across the country, these theater festivals have opened up the opportunities for playwrights to get their new plays out there. And this is really important because it allows for a playwright to get more than one production before it even gets to New York. And I think most plays get better from multiple productions. And so to have that opportunity of to have a play start in one city and the next. And right now I have two shows in production. One of them just started at Philadelphia Theater Company in previews, and it's coming into our theater in March. And the other one just started at Hartford Stage Company. And we rehearsed them in New York and then went there. And what this is allowed for is not only giving the playwright another check, which is very important, I believe, and the director and the artists involved, but it's allowed for time for growth.
So we are very lucky to have lots of talent to answer questions, but we're going to try to run this very quickly, and we are going to save questions to the end. And this part of the panel is running out of time. So I just want to ask one quick question, and then please hold your question at the end for these people. Do you think the landscape will be the same in 10 years? And quickly, one nugget of what will be a change if you see it, in terms of film, in terms of, do you think that theater will just be doing what it's always been doing? Will it be using other media? TV? Anyone who want to answer that? 10 years from now? 20? 50? 30?
I think 10 years from now, virtual reality will have changed everything, including TV and film and theater. Because I don't know if you have tried this, the Google Cardboard and the other Oculus Rift, but it's unbelievable, and it's going to change the way we watch everything, I think.
Yeah, I think 10 years from now, the top 10 television shows will all be video games of some kind. That really seems to be a trend. I mean, just in Santa Monica, where I work, even in the last few seasons of Madam Secretary, there's been a proliferation of new media companies entirely in the gaming world showing up with hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. So I really feel like that's the direction.
And one last question, and we're going to stream everything into our living rooms. How often are you going to leave your living room in 10 years from now, if you want entertainment?
Well, but the truth is, no matter what, part of theater is it's a social media you have to experience. And even if you look at the most advanced, at the opera world and the ballet, now they are streaming their productions to movie theaters. But you still have to go and sit in a movie theater to watch it live.
You can get it at home, too.
Well, you can, but ultimately, I think that social experiment is what will defy all this. Gaming is interesting because it has that social aspect attached to it, because everybody is virtually live, even though they're like, so you still have a society based around it.
But not real. How often are you going to be out of your house in 10 to 20 years? For your entertainment value.
Hold on a second.
Well, in Los Angeles, without public transportation,
What?
I try to stay in my house as much as possible.
Well, there we are.
But yeah, it won't be nearly as often.
I think it's going to be different.
This leads into what we're going to talk to our playwrights about. But I think like the film industry has stratified in these two extreme ways, I think that viewing will also, because I think we're social creatures as humans. Will begin to crave in a really major way again, if we're not already, other human contact. So I think that as more and more film and television is available in your home, I think theater may actually become more important as a way to get into contact with actual humans.
Who could ask for a better roundup for this segment for Theater Masters? Now I'd like the second panel to come up, who are playwrights, and they will introduce themselves and tell you where they're at school. Thank you very much, panel A. Okay. Come over all the way. Okay, panel 2, are we ready, please? Would you first, Sean, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and something we don't know about you. Thank you.
My name is Sean David Demers. I'm from the University of Iowa, and I recently found out that my grandfather fought in the Battle of the Bulge.
Go ahead.
You took my historical thing. We discussed this outside. My name is Marvin Gonzalez. I'm from Arizona State University. And my thing is I have a relation who was related to President Grover Cleveland. And then he was a murderer, and he crossed the Mexican border and settled there. And then now I'm related to him. Everyone's got a murderer in their family, in their bloodline.
Oh, next.
I'm Anna Fox, and I go to UCLA, and my fact is that I won a Russian speaking competition when I was 14.
I'm Jess Hanovich. I go to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And my fact is when I was 11 years old, I was a finalist for Jeopardy Kids, but did very poorly.
Neil?
I'm Tyler Gruhl. I go to Roaring Fork High School, and a fact you might not know is this is the first play I've ever written.
Perfect. Naomi, do you want to start it off?
Sure. So just to lead in from what we were talking about, so you all are choosing to be playwrights in a time where your audiences have almost literally unlimited entertainment from their couches. How are you thinking about your own work in terms of how you're going to make how you're going to make it worth it to those people to leave their houses and come be part of a theatrical experience? And you will start with Sean and just go down the line.
I tend to have a lot of unbounded optimism. So the rise of these shows are really the rise of new stories. I think it's the key, and I think Andrew pointed this out, is that it's those stories. It's the newness of them and craving this serialization that you just want to keep hanging with the story. So as a playwright, it's actually, I think it's very comforting that there are so many people out there who want that. And to be able to segue that into the theater, I think that's really the opportunity, is to try to point out that, hey, that's been here all along. And now we have these wonderful playwrights coming out of MFA programs, thanks to programs like Take 10 and Theater Masters, that we can go out there and get our plays out there and get more plays out there, as many as humanly possible. The more we support each other, the better we're all going to be.
Okay, moving on to Marvin.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to piggyback off what you were saying, Naomi, in terms of, I think that I'm optimistic because I think that the fact that we have so many options to stream media content in our living rooms I don't think. I think that by nature, human beings are social animals, and that's what gives us our humanity. So I think the theater offers something that film and television really can't. Because even if you're at a movie theater and you're still with other people, you don't talk to them. There's no intermission in the middle of the Avengers, and you don't go and talk about what's going to happen in the second act. And I think that theater offers like a unique opportunity. I don't want to compare it to church, but in a way, it's the same thing. It's getting together as a community and having a shared experience. And I think that that's something that people are going to crave. I think it's something that we can already sense that people are craving, because that's become the unique experience, to have that sort of shared experience.
I think for one, I think it's cool to be a playwright in this time, kind of going off of what people were saying before, because I don't really ever feel like bound by my job title. I think that's a lot of like what young people are experiencing these days. It's like I do this and this and this, and on the weekend I like ski or whatever, because I guess we're in Colorado, so everyone skis. But yeah, so I feel like, yes, I love playwriting and I'm really passionate about it, and that's primarily what I want to do. But I live in LA, so I imagine myself also writing for TV and probably also writing for film. So I feel like and like other mediums too. So I think there's a lot of avenues for playwrights, but I think once again playwriting is a really special medium just because of the audience, and there's so much you can do with an audience in plays. Like you can have a fourth wall and just have the audience watch, and that's totally fine, it will be entertaining, but then there's so much you can do with the audience or involve the audience that you can't really do in a film or a TV show when you're kind of just sitting at home and you can pause it, and then like I don't know, it's kind of, you can kind of mess with the audience sometimes in ways they don't appreciate because they're kind of like stuck there. But I think it's still fun for them to feel like they're a part of the experience sometimes and like get to kind of be involved somehow.
Yeah, going off of what the other playwrights were saying about having optimism for a good story, I do think that you can't beat a well-told story, a really well-told story. And if there is a well-told story that is being told at one theater in the middle of wherever, people will come out for it to see it. I mean, if you look at Hamilton, which actually isn't even a new story, it's a story a lot of us know that you can hear about in your elementary school social studies curriculum. That's not a new story. It's a story we're all familiar with, but it's being told in such a brilliant and exciting way that certainly people are coming to see it. And I don't know if I'm ever going to write a Hamilton, but I would like to write a really well-told story, and I think we are all hoping to do something like that. So that being said, I do think that the shape of the way we experience different types of theater is also changing, though. There are different types of theatrical experiences you can get that sort of almost promise like a little more bang for your buck. Shows like Sleep No More that are immersive theater where you can sort of walk around, and every time you go to see the show, you'll get a different story. So that being considered, I think about that a lot when I'm writing and trying to find new ways to tell stories. Yeah.
Here, I think I'm going to piggyback off what Marvin said, that things you don't do on a first date. Take someone to the movie theater, because you sit in a dark room and don't talk to each other. Basically, humans are incredibly social creatures. We want to talk and connect with other people. And theater is a whole experience. You have to be there for the whole show and be there with people. You can't press pause, go get some food, come back, and keep watching the show. And you can't fast forward through the parts you don't like. That's why I think... theater, like Shakespeare, has continued to exist because we want to socially experience great things like that together.
I think we're all feeling pretty terrible about ourselves that you're 14.
What a gift to have! What a gift to have the variety we have. Are there ways that you are thinking about in seeing a play that you're written that will be different than the traditional ways,
Well,
or how would you
Well, and I think talking about a show like Sleep No, so I don't know how familiar
sleep?
the people are with Sleep No More, but there's this wildly successful show. You can't even really call it a show. Basically, there's this theater group in New York that has a whole building, and you go, and it's basically Macbeth is the story, except that everyone gets masks to begin with, and you walk in, and they release you into the building, and they actually actively try to separate you from the people that you've come from. And so you can wander anywhere in this absolutely massive building for 3 hours, and the play is kind of happening in and around you, and so you can follow one character, or you can just go off on your own and look in drawers. You can literally do whatever you want in this building for 3 hours. But it's kind of like it kind of follows the story of Macbeth. So are you thinking about your work in any way like that, or other immersive theater ideas? Because something like that, which still is selling out every night, 2 shows 5 years in, that's something that people cannot get from their living room. Are you thinking about anything like that in your own work?
Anyone want to jump in?
Well, I've worked on, last year I worked on a devised immersive piece it was at the Art Museum at Arizona State University. And it was pretty incredible because at some point, it was in our second performance. At some point, I don't want to get into the weeds about what it was all about, but at some point, the people that were watching it started trying to dictate how the story played out. So they started to try to change the story, and they started like interacting with us. They almost lost the sense that they were audience members, and they were becoming active participants and engaging in the show with us like that. And it was a little unnerving at the time because I've never been an actor and had an audience member put their hands on me and like try to stop me from doing something. So it was a bit shocking. But I've gotten over it. It's been a year now, and but it was just incredible to me that people could actually get so involved in a story that way that they thought that they had agency to actually change the outcome of what they were watching. And that's absolutely at the moment anyway, that's not something that you can do with film and television. And that's one of the ways that I think theater can be quite unique.
Anyone else? Anyone trying to write a different kind of situation for a play?
Yeah, I think a lot of like that kind of devised work and playwriting is like meshing together, or a lot of people that consider themselves playwrights are kind of doing both, or there's a lot of theater companies that kind of form and they have 1 or 2 like playwrights in it that kind of write stuff specifically for that company, which I always think is really interesting. I think that's something I would be interested in doing in the future. And one of my professors at school is kind of a playwright who does a lot of devised stuff too. So we kind of, we took a class with him called Modes of Composition. That was kind of about different ways you can tell stories on a stage that aren't necessarily plays, which gave me an idea that I'm working on right now for this karaoke musical taken from the comment sections of news articles online, and like just like all the horrible things people say, and like making it into like a fun event. So like that's not a play necessarily, but it's still like a thing for the stage that I could write. It just functions differently than a play, I guess.
I have one question. So often playwrights or directors are trying to put on their own work. Have you thought of putting any of your plays, streaming any of your work, and how complicated that would be? Have you looked into that?
I've actually I've streamed all the shows that I've done at the University of Iowa, mostly because my daughter is 18 and she lives in New England, so it just gives her a way to see them. But also, it's just another. It makes you think in another way. It makes you think about maybe who the audience is and how widespread you can be with something. But it also kind of it's a good way for new playwrights to just kind of get information out there, I think. I don't know how much I'd be able to progress with that outside of the university, pipeline, just because it's my own work and I can do whatever I want. Once things get into the kind of the mainstream in the pipeline, it becomes a story for other people too. Like other people have to be involved.
Out of curiosity, how many people in the audience have ever watched a streamed live either theater, opera, or other event? That's a lot of people. Not a YouTube thing.
Like when they put them on at the Wheeler?
Yeah, right.
When the Met is live, or
Right. Yeah.
Life in Lincoln Center is streaming.
Yeah.
So you were seeing it at the same time as it's happening. you can have rebroadcasts of that, but it's the moment it's happening, and it's a lot of people are writing content, I've heard, to do this and actually put it on. There are lots of equity rules, and the rules, I don't know what the rules are, all of the rules, but it's very complicated, but one would like to be able to do that. And a question is, do you think it affects your work? Do you like the fact that it goes to a larger audience? Would you feel complicated that it was a theater thing and it was supposed to be in this one intimate space? How do you feel about streaming?
I think that any way that you can, like, one of the good things about being an MFA is if you want to, you can become a trained dramaturg, you can become a trained director, even though you're studying writing. So thinking about the play that you're writing in a different way. But I think any time that you can use the internet in any way to engage with the audience, either before or after the piece that you present, whether it's streaming it or whether it's having an interactive website to go along with it. Because I'm writing for my applied project. There's a book in it that the character is trying to write, and it's a children's book. And what I would really like to do is have a website that went along with it that was actually the children's book that you could actually interact with the missing piece of the play that you don't get when you watch it. So just to create like a fun different way for audiences to engage, with the show. After, because theater's ephemeral, so it's gone once the performance is over. But there's different ways you can keep it going after.
I was just thinking, how many people spend their time watching the ticker tape on television? That's streaming, if you think about it. That's it's a different form. It's not a story form, but that is streaming. It's live, something coming to you live immediately, and you're getting it in your living room in a different way.
Well, and it kind of comes back to the fact that, like, the sports channels are sort of the only TV channels that have experienced no dip whatsoever in light of all of this, because it's a live there's an immediacy. You must watch it live or it sort of loses its, otherwise you've heard the score. It's, if there was a big thing, you probably heard about it. So I think that's an interesting way in which theater streaming is different than film, because it's still a live performance. And I think part of the excitement of watching a live performance is that something could go horribly wrong at any moment, and you might be there to see it.
It's like NASCAR.
Yeah.
Like NASCAR.
In your MFA programs, are they preparing you in any way for doing streaming events, or are you just writing your plays to go into traditional theater? Is there any classes that are
streaming or devised or other? Are they talking about this at all?
Well, we're doing at Carnegie Mellon, we're doing some devising work. What I really like about the value of an MFA program is that there are other artists there that are practicing other things. They're MFA directors and MFA dramaturgs and MFA actors. Well, not MFA actors, but BFA actors. And there's something really wonderful and valuable about being in the same room as all these other artists and being able to find people whose styles match yours or who have similar artistic philosophies, and finding new collaborators and people to work with. We haven't talked about streaming very much, but I'd be interested in writing something that would be streaming. I think what Sean was saying, that there's a value in being somewhere where you can't get to the theater, but you can be watching it live still. The liveness of theater isn't going to go away because you're watching it from your screen in that moment. Playing it back later is different, but the excitement of being in the room, it's sort of like peeling away at an onion, right? Like, you're not going to be right there, but you'll be one layer away, which is not a terrible thing, I don't think.
My MFA program, theater, ASU is just like huge on design. So anything that has to do with technology, they'll just, you mention technology at all to your professors, and they'll start salivating. So they're really thinking about, the future of where theater can be. So that's something that, any way that you can use technology in your theater, in the theater that you make they're very encouraging of that, and thinking of new ways to present and to share theater that are non-traditional.
Naomi mentioned something that is sort of the newest thing, is this virtual reality. Do you see using that in any way in your theater pieces? And we're going to be out of time, but I'd love to hear you each comment, or anyone who'd like to. Jess?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a colleague in my program who was just got a huge grant to write this virtual reality play about a trapeze artist in a circus. And she's working with some designers right now to figure out how that works and what it means to be in an audience with other people experiencing something live, but also putting a goggle type device in front of your face. But there's something really thrilling about knowing that you have a little bit of control in what's going on, that putting something on sort of makes it, it makes it a little bit more complicated as an audience member because you are really there and you are involved. And it's almost a little bit more unsafe, and there's something really thrilling about that, I think.
So we were having this conversation is what the difference between a virtual reality play versus a virtual reality film is. So is the difference that in that case there would be a live performance that you would be watching in live time, but through the goggles?
Yeah, there are actors in front of you who are performing for you, and there are also some digital effects that can only be seen with the goggles on, is my understanding of what's going on.
Punch Drunk is doing that with Sleep No More. They're
What?
developing technology for that.
Really?
To do that sort of thing.
Huh.
Anyone else want to talk about this whole new life? Anyone else remember the old 3D things like this? Maybe no one but me. What were they called? You know, the
Viewmasters.
The Viewmasters.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the way to end this segment. And we're going to bring up our second panel. Thank you very much for being with us. Okay, quick. Panel. Slide in. Slide in. One over. Okay, go ahead. Perfect. There you go. All right, this is our third panel, and I'm going to have them begin introducing themselves. It would be nice to start maybe at Naomi's end, if they're there.
My name is Bennett Fisher. I'm currently finishing my third year at UC San Diego, and my fun thank you. Yeah. And my fun fact is I've read Moby Dick 9 times. I read it every year. I'm obsessed.
I've not ever read Moby Dick at all.
If you have any questions afterwards, if anyone wants to stay.
Come to you. My name is Jenny Murphy. I'm a first-year student at Yale School of Drama. My fun fact is that my only musical talent is that I'm an excellent whistler. That's about it. But I'm not going to do it right now.
My name's Peter Zinn. I'm in my final year at NYU. I'm a playwriting MFA student, but I support myself as a voiceover actor, and until recently I was the voice of Farmers Insurance for many years. Don't know if that's worthy of applause.
I'm Caroline Piffer. I'm a junior at Glenwood Springs High School. And my fun fact is that I wrote the play that I wrote for this. I wrote The Day Before Was Due.
Well, you see, there's great talent in this room. It just comes streaming off, right off the page. How divine! Let's begin this panel by exploring works that you are currently doing, and do you feel there's anything really new in them in terms of modern technology? Are you using anything that's new in what you're actually working on now? And do you have plans to work on something that will add some of the new things we're talking about? I'm going to start at the far end, since you always do it quickly. Start there, Ben.
So it's actually strange you've been talking about virtual reality. I haven't been able to back this up, but I think my play, Don't Be Evil, is the first play to be filmed in virtual reality. It was filmed with an Oculus. At one of the performances, they brought an Oculus camera, which is a 3D camera. And so you can put the headphones on and actually experience that opening night as if you were in the theater. And a lot of the work that I've been doing now, I've been working for the last, I guess, year and a half on an immersive piece, kind of in the vein of Sleep No More. It's called Speakeasy, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You go to a 1920s speakeasy. And what's been interesting about it is, since the audience can vote with their feet and explore, it's a 3-hour show, but it's actually 12 hours of material, because there's 6 different rooms. No, 4 different rooms. Right, that's right.
Do we get to come more than once for that?
Yes, and I think that's the whole thing. So the challenge of writing something where you can stay in one room and experience a satisfying 3 hours, not moving, and still have a good theatrical experience, and also writing something that, if you're moving around all the time, you're still enjoying things in 5-minute segments, has been a really wonderful challenge as a writer. I mean, I think it's almost simultaneously writing both in the short form and the long form, writing something that works as units of 5 minutes and something that works as a 3-hour unit. It's been immensely gratifying.
I find this wonderful. Is anyone else at your school doing this? And mention your school one more time.
UC San Diego. I think that as everyone has mentioned, this is part of the changing theatrical landscape. So I think everyone is involved that I know who's working on playwriting, not just in writing the shows in the traditional, proscenium setting. I think that immersive work, devised work, site-specific work is more regular. So I don't know if anyone in my school is doing. I got these jobs through other contexts outside of my program, but I do think that many people are dabbling in this or immersed in this in other ways.
Are the schools responding? I mean, are they teaching? Are they helping you deal with this new reality?
Well, I think that's hard to say. I think good writing is good writing, no matter the medium. So I think that what I've learned at UC San Diego is absolutely applicable to these different forms. I think what...
but isn't it more complicated writing for something like this?
I think it's just different. I mean, I think that when I like to think of writing as you're giving someone a gift, and depending on the context in which you're presenting that gift, the gift is going to change. I think what the UCSD has helped me do is write more efficiently, write, I think, more from the heart, to bring my own voice and humor to my work. And I do see that showing up in whatever form. But I think it's a hard thing necessarily to pin down what exactly the school teaches you. Part of it's just the people you're around and the time that you have to really hone your art, and that in and of itself is immensely
but
influential.
So all right, back to Naomi for a minute. The idea of writing a play versus writing for film or something, when you're trying to do a 3D or a virtual reality, do you want to make a comment about that?
Sure. Well, so I'm working on a virtual reality mini-series right now, which is sort of a similar set of challenges, because at certain points in this series, so I've been describing it sort of like you'll mainly be driving down a highway. So for the most part, while you'll be able to look any which way in the room and overhear different conversations. So the story is 360 degrees. So within this thing, I can be looking at you and I'll be hearing your conversation, but if I tilt my head this way, I'll hear Ben's conversation. If I tilt my head this way, I might hear this conversation. So you're having to write 360 degrees worth of story for all moments, but then there will also be moments at which the highway sort of separates and then comes back together. So at a certain moment in the thing, if you're looking at this door, the camera will go through that door into that room. But if you're looking at this door, the camera will go through that room into that door. And then you might hear a certain conversation in this room and a certain conversation in this room, but eventually you'll come back onto the same thing. So it sort of the storytelling in this format, where it's not just you're going to sit down and everyone's going to have the same experience, but to write something where literally no two people are going to have the same experience presents all sorts of exciting and really terrifying narrative challenges, because how as a storyteller do you still keep a compelling narrative when you actually can't control what conversation people are going to be listening to?
So there we are. Let's head right on to Yale. And
Can you repeat the question? I would prefer the question.
Well, basically, are you in any of your works that you're working on now doing anything that adds any of these new elements? Or are you doing the traditional straight line?
Well, I actually don't think a lot about technology or the specific mechanics of how one of my plays might manifest on stage when I'm writing it. But I have realized in the last year or two that a lot of my plays have things happening in them that may seem impossible to stage. A play I wrote last year, Giantess, in which one of the main characters is 30 feet tall. A play in which the whole world essentially floods by the end of the play. Where things are happening that are, metaphorical but also literally happening on stage. And what excites me about that is thinking about all of the ways that could be embodied on stage, and what kind of interesting challenges might I be presenting to designers. So those are the things that I'm thinking about. I don't really think specifically about new technologies when writing, but I'm excited by how we can use those technologies in ways that retain the humanity in the experience of theater on stage. So, yeah, that's my answer.
And
well, I love listening to people who have a passion for technology. I don't, and and I'm an older MFA student, so I was around before the internet. I was writing plays before the internet was a part of things. But I guess I've really thought hard about this question. I think the way it's impacting my writing is the impact that technology is having on people in terms of probably the negative impact. I feel like that's a theme that I'm seeing in my work in terms of people who lived in the pre-technology boom and how it's affecting them now, in terms of how it's affecting children, in terms of how it's isolating us in many ways. I feel like that creates rich opportunity for a good dramatic story. I think it creates a lot of conflict. I think universally we can all relate to that. I think we can all relate to a point in time where we said, gosh, this iPhone is working against me, or I'd really like to spend time with you. I don't really want to text you anymore. So I'm interested in that and how that's affecting us. And the other thing I want to add, at NYU they do have, although I don't get to talk to these guys because they're up in Brooklyn, but on their Brooklyn campus, I think they have the very first MFA in gaming. So the gamers are earning a degree in gaming, and it's a big deal. So anyway.
And now to our young playwright. Would you like to talk about how you would see the future and what you might do?
I personally, being a high school student, do not really use technology all that much to write, but I myself am a gamer, and I have always been really interested in those stories where you get to decide what the character does. And I think that a lot of the time we see gaming as like very uncultured and like that fat guy who sits on the couch and just plays online, but it's kind of like a play. Like, you get to be that character, and you get to be in the play, and you get to make the decisions, and you personally get to, like, every time you play it is a little different.
I think that's why Alex Maggio is right. I mean, because imagine if you could be in a movie and you're standing next to Matthew McConaughey, and then you can decide what you do next. Like, doesn't that sound great? That was an interesting example. I didn't actually mean it to go there. So, so I'm interested to hear from each of you. Last year in New York, so in the New York leg of this program, we have a round table with all the literary managers from the top theaters in New York. And the literary manager from the public theater was saying that he was having all these conversations all the time, like, oh my God, our audiences are getting older. We can't get the young people into our theater. Like, well, what do we do? And where are they? Are they just not leaving their houses? And then he went to a DJ, I don't even know what it's called, like an event, like a clubbing event where there was a hot DJ playing. And he's like, the room was packed with exactly the people we were trying to get into our theater. And he's like, that moment made me think completely differently about the ways in which we need to change what theater is to get to make those people not feel like it's sort of this monolithic, intimidating thing, but something that they can actually be part of. So I'd be interested to hear from each of you what you think about in terms of where theater is headed in the next 10 years, and if you think that we will be able to retain that sort of fourth wall traditional theater and we go and watch it, or is everything going to go more in the direction of Sleep No More and immersive theater? And
I think those things are great. I think Sleep No More is incredible. I went to it it was such an incredible experience. I do think, living in New York, though, that I feel like theater is doing pretty well. Now, it may be a lot of Disney show stuff on Broadway, but I mean, I keep hearing that Broadway is doing better and better every year. They just had for the first time ever, they had Broadway Con in New York. And I think in a way that technology is really helping maybe more traditional theater is the social network? Media stuff. And because these people in like Iceland and in Tennessee are forming these groups, who just love these Broadway shows, and some of them haven't even seen the shows. They've just listened to the recordings, and they've seen clips online. And I'm excited about what technology is doing in terms of, I think we're going to see audiences really grow and grow and grow. And I think we're going to pull out those younger audiences that didn't have exposure to theater through social media. I think it's helping. I think it's already happening right now, anyhow.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that part of, I go to some theaters, some plays that feel like television shows or movies just on stage. And I think, what Jenny was talking about with Giantess, with the imagination and the reliance on imagination, theater that asks us to, use our own, because it's representational, to fill in something that can't be staged, that is impossible. That to me is the most exciting theater. And that's something that I think the form does exclusively. If you want to create an imaginary or fantastic world on film and TV, you have to make it look like reality. Whereas theater relies on suggestion and representation. And I do think that there's been a great deal of success with plays that engage the imagination in that way, that, even some of the most kind of commercially successful theater, like Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas and elsewhere, relies a lot on this type of storytelling. I think finding ways to do that on all scales, both, with huge budgets and that kind of pageantry, and even with smaller, more intimate theaters, makes the theatrical experience distinct from what you can see at home. I think if I go to a play and I spend $80 and I feel like I could have watched it on Netflix streaming, I resent that, that time and that money. So I think that as we move forward, some of what's going to attract a new or a younger audience is immersive theater, site-specific work, but some of it's also, I think, changing the focus of how theater fits in the pantheon of entertainment, and relying more on the things that theater does best, which for me is exciting the imagination and staging the impossible.
Anna, do you?
Jenny.
Jenny.
Interesting point there. I feel that when I think about what are the things that I actually where I hope theater would go in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond, it's actually less about technology. It's more about the people who are involved in making theater. So when I think about what are the most necessary changes, it is really having theater be more representative of the complex realities of people in society, which means more stories of people of color, of queer people, of people of a diverse range of experiences and lives that aren't really usually represented or fully represented on stage. And having that focus also be centered on how do we, at the institutional level, have more of a diversity of voices at the table in creating the work. And so when I think about what is the most important thing, it's making sure that that is how we're going to maintain the vitality of theater moving forward, and that is how we are going to be able to have an art form that is going to continue to pull in new and younger audiences, is by having work. The work itself has to hold up and be compelling to a variety of people.
I think what you've said is really significant to end this part of the panel, is to encompass as many people in as many ways as possible in this wonderful form of theater. And I think the other thing is that perhaps what we're hearing is that some of the streaming or something, if we can find ways to bring the cost down, would be
Yeah.
helpful. So now we're going to say thank you to the Institute for this wonderful opportunity. Please don't leave us. And Theater Masters is going to close this segment of the television program with great appreciation. Now we're going to reopen it with questions from the audience. Yeah, and you can address your question to anyone who's on the panel. Why doesn't the first row just turn around, bring your chairs forward, and turn around and face everybody? And we'll start the second segment of the program. And we would adore to have, if Andrew is back in the other back, I don't know where Andrew is. Is Andrew back? Come and just grab a chair and sit this way so that we're on sort of two levels and we can ask questions. How does that work? Okay, perfect. Okay, Jan.
I have not seen Sleep No More, but our daughter lives in New York City and was an actress, a former actress, and she takes all of her friends to see Sleep No More who come into New York. She said she was a little bit surprised that some of the people were intimidated by it, taken back by it, and I'm wondering, do we need to educate our audiences now who are experiencing new theater? Do you think we need to, and how do we go about doing that? I mean, how does one educate an audience before they go to a new experience?
Well, to me, I mean, I am not I'm not easily intimidated as a person, particularly with theater, because I live it. But going to Sleep No More was a little bit terrifying because you're just released into this very dark and spooky building and encouraged, and everyone is wearing masks. So it's definitely a little scary. I think that's so good. I think the more, that's great. Pull people out of their comfort zones, make them so uncomfortable, take them away from the person they came with, and you will learn things about yourself that you never, that's amazing if they can be intimidated. As long as you can get them in the door, then intimidate the hell out of them. I don't.
And then send them home telling other people to come.
Most of my friends, my very close friends growing up, are not theater people, and when they go to the theater, they don't necessarily feel welcome. They're very self-conscious that they feel they don't belong. They are very uncomfortable in the environment, and I think part of what's going to help increase theater's appeal or make it continually relevant is letting go of some of the traditions that we feel are appropriate in the theater. Like making it a bigger tent and allowing a more diverse audience. I feel like, you mentioned wanting to see stories that represent a broader spectrum of what our country and our society is. But I also feel like the other side of that is making an environment where a more diverse group is welcome. There are a number of sort of harrowing stories this year about, the worst type of elitism and snobbishness manifested at theaters, where people who are not traditional theater goers felt out of place in that context. And, I think you can look at those as isolated cases of, interpersonal conflict. But I do think that, it's intimidating for people who are not regular theater goers to enter into a form where they feel like they're not welcome, they're not the target audience. And if we are more magnanimous, if we're more encouraging, then maybe we'll see a different sort of audience develop.
Yeah, I think as long as, I'm not sure if this is working, but I'm going to go for it.
Is it working?
Yes, it is. I think as long as your experience doesn't pose like a legal liability to your audience, that you inform them of those types of things beforehand, then go for it. I mean, I think audiences are very smart and only getting smarter and want to be challenged and entertained in ways that they don't expect. So going with what Naomi and Ben were saying, I think it's important to go for it.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think this is just more for future generations. I think a lot of what can prepare audiences for that sort of thing starts with theater for very young audiences, children's theater. I think there's a lot of really tremendous work being done with kids who are pre-kindergarten, and it's highly interactive, and it's really sort of setting them up for a lifetime of being open to interesting theatrical experiences. And so I'm excited about what I'm seeing there. I think that could pay dividends for the next generation.
Yes, thank you, David. Letting him.
So I just, so I guess I wanted to get your opinions on how television has been transformed because primarily they're hiring playwrights now, which is an example. They've been hiring playwrights, and so it's kind of raised the bar for television. And how do you feel about that? And
Alex, why don't you say something, please?
I feel great about that. And I think a lot of other playwrights do too. I mean, the opening up of all sorts of new content has created demand for increasingly sophisticated and agile storytelling, which I think is something playwrights do extremely well. And so it's been a tremendous opportunity. I mean, I feel like it gives you a level of cachet you wouldn't have before. And it's really not just the writers. I think there's been a real sort of shift in terms of the creative executives in Hollywood. A lot more and more of them have theater backgrounds. One of my friends who basically runs limited series at Fox has a PhD from Yale in theater. And she's just sort of just one of many examples of people who are increasingly open to that sort of thing. So it's tremendous. I think it's even still growing.
Well, and I think Alex started to touch on this earlier, but Netflix and Amazon have blown open television in the most exciting way. What I was saying about film getting stodgier and stodgier, I think TV is so exciting right now because of what you're talking about, and also because Netflix, I mean, for so long there have been gatekeepers who have had sort of like